Now we move on to exploring the preferences in more detail. This involves the following steps: defining and describing the preference pair, bringing the preference to life using illustrations and anecdotes, exploring examples to help the respondent decide on their preference in this area, introducing the results from the report for this preference, asking the respondent to decide their preference in this area, exploring how they can apply the MBTI information.
So let's move on now to look at extraversion, introversion in a bit more depth.
Okay.
So straight away, what do those words mean to you, Paul?
Okay, extraversion, that's someone who's quite loud, someone who's quite confident, and introversion would be someone who's quiet and maybe quite shy.
Okay, and that's how we use those words in our everyday speech. But we have to be a bit careful because with MBTI, we use these words in a very specific way. Extraversion is nothing about, it's not to do with social confidence.
Okay.
And introversion's not about being shy. It's just about where you get your energy from.
Okay.
Okay, so extraversion is about getting your energy from outside, and introversion is about getting your energy from the inside. It's nothing about, it says nothing about social confidence or shyness.
Okay.
Let's have a little bit of a look in more depth. So here we have some diagrams of extraversion and introversion, and you can see with extraversion, the interaction with the outside is all on the outside, you can see it. With introversion, there's the same number of arrows on these two diagrams, same amount of interaction, but all the interaction is happening inside. So it can look a lot quieter. So extraversion is about focusing your energy outwards. So when you're using extraversion, you're looking out and you're being distracted maybe, looking at everything that's going on. When you're using your introversion, you're sort of shutting that off and you're accessing your deep inner reflection and being peaceful like that.
Okay.
When you're using extraversion, you might want to talk something through. So if you wanted to, let's say you were meeting your mates down the pub and they said, oh, when should we go? You might actually say, well, actually, I think it's going to be raining on Saturday, so I'll go shopping on Saturday. And then I can do my washing and ironing and finish that off. Or let's go out to the pub on Sunday. But all your friends would hear all that because they will have heard you thinking it through. If you used introversion, when they said, when should we go down the pub, you would go through exactly the same thought process, but you wouldn't be speaking it, you'd be thinking it. So they'd hear this. Let's go on Sunday. But the thought process is exactly the same.
Okay.
But it's going on inside. People who use extraversion to learn best through actually discussing or actually doing something. So they learn by doing it, by acting. People who prefer introversion prefer to reflect and think about it first. Maybe watch somebody do something, learn like that, and then have a go.
Okay.
People who have a preference for extraversion have a breadth of interests. So they have many different hobbies. They might say they're jack of all trades, master of none. Whereas people with a preference for introversion may spend exactly the same amount of time on their hobbies, but they have fewer hobbies, so they spend longer on each one. So they go deeper and they become a bit more of an expert on those hobbies. Mm-hmm. And of course, because of these arrows on the outside, extroverts tend to speak exactly what they're thinking, and then they'll think about it later. And you may hear them say, oh, wish I'd never said that. Shouldn't have said that. Whereas introverts tend to think things through first and then speak. So in a meeting, you might find the meeting's finished and the introverts are going, oh no, I wish I'd said that. Missed my opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Let me bring that to life a little bit with an example. I'm going to tell you a little story about an extrovert and an introvert taking a very long car journey. And as usual, the introvert is quite peacefully driving and talking to the extrovert, and the extrovert's talking a lot more. And at one stage, the extrovert then thinks, oh, I remember about Myers-Briggs. My friend, I think, has got a preference for introversion. Maybe I'm talking too much. I'll give them a bit of peace and quiet, and so I'll stop talking and see what happens. And I'll wait until they say something. So 5 minutes goes past, 10 minutes goes past, and the extrovert is looking at them and having to stop themselves from saying something or commenting on things that are happening. And he's waiting and waiting for the introvert to talk. And finally, the introvert says, "Oh, should we turn off here?" And the extrovert goes, "Oh, thank goodness." And so all the time that the introvert is being peaceful, that's energising for the introvert. It's being energised by that peace and tranquility. When the extrovert's talking, they're getting energised by talking. So it's a whole different dynamic.
That makes sense.
Okay.
In this part of the video, we look at how Pauline encourages Paul to assess himself on the preference pair. She will be demonstrating how to use the feedback cards to explore Paul's preference. Effective questioning will help the respondent to self-assess. Pauline uses open questions to encourage Paul to think about his behaviours and how these help illuminate his preferences. She debriefs the question without telling Paul his preference, leaving him to say which way he thinks he leans. Remember that people are the best judge of their own type, and your role is to encourage them to decide rather than telling them or leading them.
Okay, let's look at extraversion and introversion as they relate to you and your role now, Paul.
Okay.
There's a list of areas there that we could talk about. If you have a look and choose one.
Okay. I think I'd like to talk about my preferred working environment.
Right, okay, that's obviously relevant to your role.
Yeah.
So, preferred working environment. Tell me a little bit about where you work at the moment.
Well, that's an interesting question. As you know, I've been working here for 6 months. When I first started, it was really, really quiet, which I found really frustrating, bearing in mind I'm in sales. Mm-hmm. I wanted there to be a much bigger buzz around the office. But now I've introduced a few different initiatives to the team. There is a little bit more of a buzz. I don't think we're all the way there yet, but it is a bit better.
Okay. You say it's a bit better for you. What's it like when it is quiet?
Well, I find it really frustrating because I don't feel there's enough energy in the office. I don't feel there's enough positivity. I feel that people aren't sharing ideas. So when it is quiet, I do wonder what is actually happening.
Okay. And is it ever too loud for you?
No, not at all. I mean, I have tried to introduce some different initiatives, and things are getting better for me and the team, in my opinion, because there's a lot more positivity, and I can see that people seem to be enjoying themselves better. So okay. Yeah.
Well, let's look at how extroverts and introverts prefer their working environment to be.
Okay.
People with a preference for extraversion enjoy opportunities for interaction, so they're always looking to interrupt someone or maybe join a conversation. They like plenty of stimulation, so a buzz, a bit of noise. They like some background noise, so if it was very quiet, they might prefer to have even a radio on in the background just to get energised from that noise. And they prefer a busy and lively environment, lots of stuff happening. People with a preference for introversion, on the other hand, they prefer a nice quiet space so that they can concentrate and access their thoughts. They prefer quiet rather than noise. If there is some background noise, that can quite irritate them. And they prefer a calm and spacious environment.
Okay.
So, does either of those sound like you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I do like to reflect on certain things, and if I've got something serious to work on, I do prefer to take myself off and focus on that. But more often than not, I would be preferring to have a bit more noise and stimulation, yeah.
Okay.
Having explored the preference pair with the respondent, we now introduce the result from the MBTI questionnaire. Here, it is important to explain that this result is about the clarity of preference, not strength. The respondent can now indicate their best fit on this preference, considering both their self-assessment and the reported result. Remind them that it is their choice. The section concludes with a discussion of how this preference could be used most effectively.
Now we've explored a number of areas there about extraversion, introversion and how you use those preferences. Let's look at how you answered the MBTI questionnaire last week.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'm going to give you this report later, but just if you turn over in your workbook there, the information that the report tells me is that you've answered in a way that suggests that you are an extrovert.
Okay.
And the MBTI questionnaire has sorted you very clearly. That doesn't mean you're a strong extrovert, it just means that it's very confident that it's sorted you into the right category.
Okay.
So if we record that now.
All right. Shall I write on here?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And
you said very
the
clear.
clarity is very clear.
Okay.
Now that's the reported type, the way you answered the questionnaire. Now what I'm going to ask you to do is to think about that, but also take into account all the personal examples that you gave me when we were looking through the cards. And on balance, if you think you can decide where your preference might be, either for extroversion or introversion, record it here where it says best fit type. So do you feel able to?
Yeah, definitely. I think even though I gave some examples of how I like to reflect on certain things and have a little bit of quiet time, I think more often than not, I do prefer, and I certainly get my energy from outside things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to record that then where it says best fit type.
Okay.
And decide whether you're very sure, quite sure or not sure.
Yeah, I think I'm, I know I'm very sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Lovely. Okay. Now you yourself said when we went through the cards, you did actually use introversion as well. So you do use both, but what you're saying is you think your preference is for extroversion.
Yeah.
Let's explore that a little bit further. So where in your role at the moment do you think you use extroversion quite well?
Well, as a sales manager, I need to motivate my team. So I think I use extroversion well to do that, to generate a bit of an atmosphere, to generate positivity, and increase morale, so we can all have a good day or week at the office.
Okay. And when does extroversion work perhaps less well for you?
I think there must be instances where individuals would need to be focusing on something specific and maybe need a bit of quiet space to do so. So I can't always be banging the drum, not that I do that, but I can't always be as extroverted. It might actually allow someone to become less focused on what they're doing.
Right. Okay. So let's look at introversion. When do you think you use introversion at work?
Sometimes I'd need to write a report or a specific proposal for one of my customers, which would need me to focus purely on that and nothing else. I would tend to go off to another meeting room and actually shut the door on the outside world and actually focus on that for however long it needs to be done. So that's when I use introversion.
Okay. And when we started this session, you said you were going to use the MBTI for valuing diversity. Thinking about your team, can you see sometimes when maybe extroversion is appropriate and sometimes maybe when introversion is more appropriate with your team?
Yeah, I mean, generally when we're on the phone speaking to our clients and also selling some of our instruments, it's really important that everyone is engaging with people, but there are times later on that we do need to actually have some quiet time and write the proposals to our customers.
Right.
So I think those two are the two extremes from extroversion and introversion.
Okay, and do you think you've got a good balance there, or is there any development you could do to make sure that everybody's getting their needs met?
Well, there's definitely some areas to improve on, because I would tend to treat everyone the same and try and involve everyone at the same time. But I have noticed that a couple of them are actually a lot quieter than the others.
Okay.
But after going through this, maybe that's because they have a different preference.
Right. Okay. So you maybe think that your enthusiasm is towards extroversion, and there may be some other people there that may need a little bit more quiet time than perhaps you do.
Yeah, I think so.
That's great. Okay.